So we're getting pretty deep into season 1 of Krypton. Now I think it started a bit slow, but things have really picked up. I think we're going to get a great last couple episodes, a really satisfying finale. I want to do two things. I wanted to put up photos of the original movie that came out in the 1970s, the original Superman, Man of Steel, and then also the TV show, so you can get an idea of how the portrayal of Krypton and what people wear, the outfits, the military equipment, the ships, the landscapes, the architecture even. You can get a sense of how it changes, because in some ways it's very similar, in some ways it's different. And then while I talk about that, I want to talk about the alliances that we had before episode 7 and the 5 different factions we had, and how after episode 7 it's kind of collapsed. Now we really have only 2 main factions, and you might have some people switching over, but things are a lot more simpler now, because before episode 7 we had 5 main factions. We had Braniac trying to take over Krypton, Kandor more specifically. Then we had General Zodd, who traveled back in time, and he's trying to stop Braniac, because he knows if Braniac takes Kandor, that's going to destabilize the core of Krypton, and in 200 years, Krypton's going to be destroyed. So Zodd is a time traveler. Then we have Adam, who traveled back in time as well. Now, all he knew was that there was someone who traveled back in time, and that he wanted to stop that person, who was the time traveler, from doing anything, any change that would change the timeline and have Superman not come into existence. So he didn't know who his enemy was. Originally, he thought it must be Braniac. Then when he realized that Braniac didn't travel in time, and Zodd says, actually, I travel in time, immediately Adam thinks that Zodd is the enemy. So now Adam and Braniac are actually on the same side, because Adam just wants to stop any time travel shenanigans from taking place. Zodd, because he's unhappy with what actually happened in the timeline, the destruction of Krypton, Zodd does want to change the timeline. So they're at odds. Then you have the Cythonnites. Now, they seem to be ambivalent on the question of Braniac. You would assume that they're opposed to Braniac, but we haven't really seen that. The only thing we've seen is that their overriding principle is they do not want this doomsday weapon to be used. The only thing we know about this doomsday weapon, we see it in Batman vs. Superman. We don't know if it's the same principles at play, but what we do know is that a combination of the Zodds and the L's back a long time ago, they got together and they created this weapon because they thought it would help the world. But the Cythonnites, they think this weapon signals the end of everything and doomsday, so they want to guard it. So they're opposed to Zodd, because Zodd wants to defeat Braniac at any cost. So he's willing to use this doomsday weapon. The Cythonnites, they say, no, you can't use that. So that's why they're at odds as well. And then you have the 5th faction, which is the Vexes and Jayna and Dev. Now, they all wanted to overthrow the voice of Ra. They didn't even know about Braniac coming. It was just something completely independently. They came up with this idea, mostly Daron. He came up with the idea that he wanted to overthrow the voice of Ra. So now, after episode 7, what do we have? We only really have 2 sides. We've got the Braniac side with Braniac, the members of the Sagitari that he's been able to co-opt with his tentacles, which was actually a pretty cool practical effect. And then Daron, who immediately before, it seemed like he was just power hungry and he would do anything to get power. Now we realize he's really just spineless and he will do anything, even sacrificing his own daughter to stay alive. So now he's aligned with Braniac. Adam, as I mentioned, is aligned with Braniac. And then everyone else is on the other side trying to stop Braniac, including, I guess, the Cythonnites. They're, again, the wild card who just wants Doomsday not to be used. Now, what's interesting is Seg, which side is he going to be on? Because right now, it's hard for him when Adam says, hey, you need to let your whole planet be destroyed just so this potential future grandson may save the world at some point later. That's a pretty tough sell. And you hear Seg saying, everything I do in my life, if I know that my planet and all my descendants, everyone I love, is going to be destroyed anyways in 200 years, how can I go around and live my life? Because I know nothing I do has any permanence or matters. What's interesting is that's just a microcosm, or that's just one very extreme example of what we all have to deal with. Because for all of us, we know the species isn't going to be infinite. Eventually the sun's going to swallow the Earth. I guess hypothetically, we could develop space travel and escape that. But realistically, for all of us, we're going to die. Our species is going to die. Nothing is permanent. So it's just interesting how maybe part of Seg and his journey is going to be realizing that even if Krypton's going to be destroyed in 200 years, he can still live a meaningful life and still feel fulfilled. And we get really interesting information in this episode. So there's a theory that Zodd, his father, is actually Seg. And that would be so fascinating because that would mean his grandson is Superman and his son is Zodd. So his grandson and his son, they become mortal enemies. And we get evidence for that because, first of all, remember Zodd is the head of this Black Zero organization. I think we've forgotten that in the last couple episodes. So not only is Zodd fighting against Braniac, he also has all these Black Zero members at his disposal. Be interesting to find out how he was able to, in such a short time, he's presumably traveled back in time recently, how he was able to amass such an organization. But nonetheless, Zodd says he doesn't know who his father is, and his mother never told him. So his mother's Lyta. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if Sag got Lyta pregnant, and then him and Vex, they started a thing, so Lyta felt bad about that and never said anything to anyone. So really, only Lyta, and not now, but in the future, only she would know. So Superman and Zodd, they never knew that, obviously, they never knew that they had this connection, but people, through this time traveling, they may find out. And last thing I want to mention, it's interesting, in Man of Steel, we get this characterization of Zodd, that he only cares about the survival of Krypton. That's been baked into his essence, and we learn why that is. So Lyta, she, in this timeline, she saw the destruction. She was right up close and personal, fighting on Brainiac's ship, seeing him take Kandor away. So she was so upset by this when she was deciding what is my son, what is Zodd's purpose going to be. She chose to make his purpose nothing but a weapon in the defense of Krypton. So it's kind of interesting that this characterization that we've known Zodd has, we get that fleshed out a bit of how that came to be exactly.